Her aunt slammed the folder onto the courtroom table and smiled, not at the judge, but directly at Nia. She has nothing, Aunt Lorraine said, her voice smooth as polished marble. No husband, no stable income, no future. And you want to leave a child with that? The words hit Nia like a fist to the chest. She had survived 2 years of double shifts, empty refrigerators, and sleeping in her coat so Maya could have the only blanket. And this woman, who hadn't called once after the funeral, was standing in front of a judge calling her nothing. If you were Naya, sitting in that chair, what would you have done? Because what she did next, in a diner, alone, at midnight, set off a chain of events nobody in that courtroom could have predicted. Subscribe and follow this story all the way to the end. If you enjoy it, hit like and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The diner was called Lena's, and it had no right to still be open. The sign outside flickered the way it had flickered for 3 years, one letter permanently dark, so the sign read Lee A's instead of Lena's. And the owner, a stubborn Greek man named Petros, who had known Nia since she was 19, refused to fix it because he said it gave the place character. Nia had told him once that it gave the place the look of a building that had given up. He had laughed. She hadn't really been joking. It was Tuesday. It was past 11. The rain outside was the kind that didn't fall so much as arrive. Heavy and sideways and mean. The kind that made Chicago in November feel like the city was trying to push you out. Nia Brooks was wiping down the counter for the 4th time. Not because it was dirty, because if she stopped moving, she was going to cry, and she could not cry. Not here. Not yet. She was 29 years old, and she felt 60. Her feet had stopped hurting 2 hours ago, which she had learned meant they had gone past hurting into something else entirely, some numb territory where her body had simply stopped sending distress signals because it had learned she wasn't going to do anything about them anyway. Her hair was tucked up under a cap that used to be black and was now closer to gray from too many washes. Her uniform, a pale blue thing that had never fit right, always too tight across the shoulders, always pulling at the waist, had a new coffee stain near the hem that she had blotted with a wet napkin and then simply accepted. She had bigger problems than coffee stains. The diner had 4 customers, a truck driver in the back corner who had been nursing the same cup of decaf for an hour and a half, an older woman near the window who came in every Tuesday and ordered a grilled cheese and nothing else and never spoke to anyone, 2 college kids near the door splitting a plate of fries, talking about something that made them laugh every 40 seconds. The kind of uncomplicated laughter that made Nia feel ancient. She wiped the counter again. At 6:53 that morning, Marcus had called her. Not in person, on the phone. He hadn't even had the decency to come to her face. Nia. That was how he'd started. Just her name. Flat. No hey, no baby, no nothing. Just her name and a voice that already told her everything before he said another word. Marcus. She had been feeding Maya breakfast. Maya had been pretending not to listen, which meant she was listening to every single syllable. I can't do it, he said. 3 words. 4 years together. 3 words. Can't do what? Nia said, even though she knew. She had known for 2 weeks. She had seen it in the way he stopped meeting her eyes, in the way he found excuses not to come over, in the way he'd said, I'll think about it when she explained what the lawyer had told her, that a stable 2-parent household would dramatically strengthen her case against Lorraine's petition for guardianship. The marriage thing, Marcus said. I'm not ready for that. Marcus, I'm not ready, he said again, louder, like volume would make it make sense. You sprung this on me. This whole, Nia, this is your family situation. This isn't something I signed up for. She had stood there holding a spatula and stared at the wall above the stove. Maya was 10. Maya had been 7 when their parents died in a car accident on the interstate going to visit their grandmother, and Naya had been 26, living in a studio apartment, working 2 jobs, and suddenly she was someone's parent. She hadn't asked anyone for permission. She hadn't told the universe she wasn't ready. She had just done it. She's a child, Nia said quietly. She's a 10-year-old child who has nobody else. She has you. The judge might not think that's enough. That's the whole point. Then get a lawyer. I have a lawyer, Marcus. He says, I'm not marrying you so you can win a court case. His voice had shifted, gone tight. That's not love, Nia. That's strategy. And I can't be a strategy. She had wanted to ask him when exactly love had entered into his thinking, because she had a list of moments over 4 years where she could have used some of that love and hadn't seen much evidence of it. But Maya was at the table, head down over her cereal, her small shoulders held very still, and Nia would not have that conversation in front of her. Okay, Nia said. Okay? Okay, Marcus. Thank you for calling. She had hung up. She had finished making Maya's lunch. She had walked Maya to the bus stop in the rain with an umbrella that listed hard to the left and got them both half wet anyway. She had kissed Maya on the forehead and told her to have a good day. Maya had looked up at her with those serious dark eyes and said, "Is everything going to be okay, Nia?" And Nia had said, "Of course it is, baby." She did not know if that was true. The hearing was at 9 in the morning, less than 10 hours away now. And the lawyer had made it very clear, as clear as he could without actually saying you're going to lose, that without something substantial to counter Lorraine's petition, the judge was likely to look at the picture and see what Lorraine wanted him to see. A single woman, no spouse, working-class income, a 2-bedroom apartment with a leak in the bathroom ceiling, no savings account worth mentioning, compared to Lorraine's 4-bedroom home in Evanston and her husband's accounting practice and the trust fund she kept mentioning like a weapon. The trust fund. $42,000 that their parents had set aside for Maya's education, to be administered by whoever held guardianship. Lorraine had never once visited in 2 years. Not once. And now she wanted guardianship. Nia knew what that meant. She wasn't stupid, and she wasn't naive. She'd seen how Lorraine looked at their mother's jewelry when they were growing up. She knew what Lorraine saw when she looked at Maya. She saw a number. She saw $42,000. And whatever she could do with a child, she could dress up and show off at church on Sundays. She had not seen Maya cry at night for 6 months after the accident. She had not held that child through nightmares. She had not taught her how to do her hair again when she was old enough to learn, sitting on the floor together with coconut oil and a wide-toothed comb, Maya squirming and complaining and Nia saying, hold still, almost done, and both of them eventually laughing about nothing in particular. Lorraine did not get to take that. Nia wiped the counter. The 2 college kids near the door left, dropping a 5 on the table without looking up from their phones. The truck driver asked for a refill. Nia brought the carafe, poured without being asked, offered a small smile he didn't notice. The woman by the window finished her grilled cheese, folded her napkin with strange precision, and left exact change in a small stack. By 11:15, the diner was empty except for Nia and the truck driver and the sound of rain. Petros had gone home at 10, left her to close. He trusted her with his keys and his register and his lopsided sign, and she trusted him to pay her on Friday without making her ask twice. It was as close to a functional relationship as she had managed with any employer in 3 years. She went to the back, to the small alcove near the storage room where the old landline phone sat on a shelf between a box of napkins and a bottle of cleaning solution. She had told herself she was going to call Renee, her best friend since high school. Renee, who always answered. Renee, who always had something practical to say, something grounding, something that pulled Nia back from the edge of panic and reminded her that she was capable and strong and all those other things people said when they had run out of actual help to offer. She picked up the receiver. She dialed. The phone rang 3 times. 4. Then the voicemail. "Hey, this is Renee. You know what to do." Nia opened her mouth. She meant to leave a normal message. She meant to say, "Call me back when you get this. I'm at the diner. I just need to talk." She meant to be measured and reasonable and adult about everything. What came out was different. "I don't know what I'm going to do." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hadn't meant it to. She pressed her hand flat against the wall and closed her eyes. "The hearing is tomorrow, and Marcus he's not coming. He bailed. And I don't," the lawyer said, "without a husband, Renee, without some kind of stability on paper, she might actually rule in Lorraine's favor, and I can't." She stopped, breathed. "I would marry anyone," she said. The words came out ragged. "I mean that. Anyone. I don't care. I don't care who it is or what it looks like, or if it means Maya stays with me, I would marry a complete stranger. I'd marry whoever walked through that door right now. I swear to God. I can't lose her. I can't lose her too. She stood there with her hand pressed to the wall and the phone against her ear and the rain loud on the roof overhead, and she let herself feel it for just that one moment, the full terrible weight of it, and then she pulled herself back together the way she had been pulling herself together for 2 years, and she took a breath, and she was about to say, "Call me back," and hang up and go finish closing the diner. She did not notice that the receiver had shifted slightly against the shelf. She did not notice that the phone, old and loose in its cradle the way old phones get, had caught on the edge of the napkin box when she'd leaned forward, holding the line open even after she'd set it down. She did not notice any of that. What she noticed was that when she turned around and walked back out to the front of the diner, the booth in the far corner, the one she had assumed was empty, the one shrouded in the particular darkness that came from the 2 overhead bulbs that Petros had been meaning to replace for 6 months, was not empty. A man was sitting in it. She didn't know how long he had been there. That was the thing that hit her first. Not who he was, not what he looked like, but the simple fact that she had not seen him come in, had not heard the bell above the door, had not noticed another human being enter this space while she had been standing 10 feet away, falling apart on a telephone. He was looking at her. Not the way the truck driver looked at her, not really seeing her, not the way customers looked at servers, cataloging her as a function. He was looking at her the way you look at someone you have been waiting to see. Patient, direct, without any particular urgency, as though he had all the time in the world and intended to use it. He was wearing a dark suit, which was wrong for 11:15 on a Tuesday night in a diner in this part of Chicago. It was the kind of suit that cost more than her monthly rent and had been pressed that morning by someone other than him. He was somewhere between 35 and 40, black, with a jaw that looked like it had been set in concrete and eyes that caught the light in the quiet, steady way that expensive things catch light. He said, "I apologize for the intrusion." His voice was low, not soft. There was nothing fragile about it, but low, careful, like someone who had learned a long time ago that you didn't need to raise your voice to be heard. Nia stared at him. She was aware that her eyes were red. She was aware that she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had just been crying in the back room of a diner at 11 o'clock at night. "We're closed," she said. "I know." He didn't move. "I've been here for a while. I sat down before you turned the sign." She tried to think back. She had flipped the sign at 10:30, which meant he had been sitting in that dark booth for 45 minutes while she'd been wiping counters and drowning in her own head. "I didn't see you," she said. "No," he agreed. "You had other things on your mind." Something about the way he said it made the back of her neck go tight. She crossed her arms. "Can I get you something, or—" "I heard what you said." The words landed flat and clean, like a stone dropped in still water. She went very still. "What?" "On the phone." He hadn't moved. His hands were on the table, both of them, relaxed, visible. "I wasn't trying to listen, but the walls in this place aren't particularly thick, and you weren't particularly quiet." That the floor did something strange beneath her feet, a kind of tilt. She thought about what she had said. The exact words. "I would marry anyone. I would marry whoever walked through that door right now, out loud." On a phone she thought was connected to her best friend's voicemail, in an empty diner that was not, apparently, empty. "That was a private conversation," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "It was." He nodded once. "And I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear it. I think you deserve better than that." She didn't know what to do with that sentence. She stood there behind the counter with her arms crossed and waited. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. She tensed. She couldn't help it. And he noticed, and he slowed his hand deliberately before pulling out a plain white card and setting it on the table. "My name is Damien Devereaux," he said. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Not from the news exactly. Not from anything you could point to and say, "Here, this is where I learned this." It was more like the way you know certain things about a city, absorbed through proximity, through the particular silences that fall when certain subjects come up, through the way people changed the subject or changed the channel or looked at the floor. Damien Devereaux was one of those names that existed in the space between what was said and what wasn't. Her arms tightened across her chest. "I know who you are," she said. "Then you know I don't make offers I don't intend to keep." You don't know anything about me. I know you're a good waitress, he said, and something about the simplicity of it made her jaw tighten because it was such an odd thing to say in that moment, such a human, mundane, almost gentle thing. I know you've been working here for at least 2 years because I've been coming in on Tuesday nights for 2 years, and you've always been the one closing. I know you're raising a child that isn't yours by blood, but is yours in every way that matters. I know you're going to lose her tomorrow, unless something changes in the next few hours. The silence stretched. What do you want? Nia said. I need a wife. He said it the way he might say he needed a cup of coffee. Direct, businesslike. Not cold exactly, but clear. Not a romantic wife, a legal wife. My business interests are under federal scrutiny, and the arrangement would provide a layer of protection that my attorneys have recommended. You want to use me. I want to make a transaction that benefits us both. He looked at her steadily. You need a husband before 9 in the morning. I need documentation of a stable personal life before the end of this month. We are, as of right now, the only 2 people in this room. Nia stood there and thought about Maya's face at the bus stop, the serious dark eyes. Is everything going to be okay, Nia? She thought about Lorraine's smile in that courtroom. She thought about Marcus saying this isn't something I signed up for and hanging up on 4 years like it was a magazine subscription. If I said yes, she said, and I'm not saying yes, I'm asking a hypothetical, what exactly would that look like? He folded his hands on the table. It would look like a marriage, he said. Legal, documented, a shared address, shared financials on paper, full legal protections for you and the child. My attorneys would handle the hearing tomorrow. You would not walk into that courtroom alone. And when it's over? When it's over, we discuss what comes next. That conversation does not happen tonight. She stared at him for a long moment. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just waited, in that particular way of his that made her feel, strangely, like the decision was genuinely hers. You've been coming here every Tuesday, she said slowly. For 2 years. Yes. And you never... She stopped, reframed. You never said anything. To me. You just sat in the dark and drank coffee. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you seemed like someone who had enough people wanting things from her. She didn't know what to do with that either. I need to think, she said. You have about 7 hours. She picked up his card from where it sat on the table. It was heavy stock, cream-colored, with just his name and a phone number. No title. No company. Just a name. She held it in both hands and looked at it and thought about all the ways this could go wrong, the long, disastrous, terrible ways. And she thought about Maya's face, and she thought about a 10-year-old girl in Lorraine's 4-bedroom house in Evanston being shown off at Sunday dinners while the trust fund quietly disappeared. Outside, the rain kept coming. She set the card down on the counter. She picked up her pen. She wrote 2 words on a napkin and slid it across to him. I'm in. He looked at it. He nodded once. Be ready in an hour, he said. He stood, and he was taller than she'd realized, a full head over her, and reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a phone. I have calls to make. So do I, Nia said. She went back to the landline in the alcove. She noticed this time that the receiver was slightly off the hook. She didn't know yet what that meant. She would. She stood in the alcove for 3 full seconds, staring at the receiver before she understood what she was looking at. The phone hadn't hung up. The cradle was old, the plastic worn smooth on one side from years of being set down in a hurry, and the receiver had tilted on the edge of the napkin box she'd knocked with her elbow when she'd leaned in to dial. It had rested there at an angle, the line still connected, the small red light on the base still glowing the way it glowed when a call was active. Nia picked it up slowly. Renee? She said. Nothing. A soft crackle. Then the automated voice of the carrier. If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and dial again. She hung up. She stood there and replayed it. The moment she'd set the receiver down. How long ago? What she had said after. I would marry anyone. I would marry whoever walked through that door right now. All of it. Out loud into an open line on a voicemail that had apparently stayed recording or stayed connected far longer than she'd realized. She told herself it didn't matter. Renee's voicemail had probably cut off. 30 seconds, maybe 60, that's all those old systems gave you before they disconnected. Whatever she'd said into that phone, Renee had gotten 30 seconds of crying and static, and that was it. She told herself that. She went back out front. Damien was standing near the door with his phone to his ear, speaking in a low, clipped voice to someone she couldn't see. He wasn't pacing. He stood perfectly still the way certain men stand when they are used to occupying space without asking permission for it. She caught fragments. The magistrate, before 6, I don't care what it costs. And then he glanced up and registered her presence and turned slightly away to finish the conversation. Nia went behind the counter. She counted the register. She did it wrong twice because her hands weren't entirely steady, and she had to recount the 20s 3 times before she trusted herself. She wrote the number in Petros's ledger. She turned off the coffee warmers. She did all the closing tasks she had done 1,000 times, each one grounding her for a few seconds before her brain tried to sprint forward into tomorrow, and she had to drag it back. When Damien finished his call, he came to stand at the counter. Not on a stool. He didn't sit. Just stood there, 3 feet away, watching her work with an attention that was neither rude nor warm, just present. "My car is outside," he said. "When you're ready." "I need to go home first." "I know." "I need to get Maya. She's with the neighbor, Mrs. Farrow. She watches her when I close late, but I can't just leave her there until morning." "Of course. And I need to pack something. For her. For the hearing." "We'll have time." She stopped wiping the counter and looked at him directly. "You say we're already something." He met her eyes without blinking. "We made an agreement. That makes us something." She didn't have an answer for that, so she put on her coat, turned off the last of the lights, and locked Lena's behind her for what she would later realize was the last ordinary night of her life. The car outside was black, long, and immaculate, with a driver who got out when he saw them coming and opened the back door without being asked. He was a large man, 50s, wearing a dark jacket, and he looked at Nia with an expression of complete neutrality that somehow managed to communicate respect anyway. His name, Damien told her, was Bernard. Bernard said, "Evening, ma'am," and held the door, and that was all. Inside the car it smelled like leather and something faintly cedar. Nia sat as far toward her own door as the seat allowed, which wasn't far, and kept her bag on her lap. Damien sat on his side and gave Bernard the address she'd given him and then said nothing. The city moved past the windows, wet and orange-lit and largely empty at this hour, the rain still steady overhead. After 2 minutes of silence, Nia said, "What happens if the judge doesn't buy it?" "The judge will buy it." "That's not an answer." He turned to look at her. "My attorneys have handled more complicated situations than a custody hearing. By the time we walk into that courtroom, everything that needs to be documented will be documented. The marriage certificate, the financial disclosures, the property." "What property?" He was quiet for a beat. "An estate in Lincoln Park. It will be placed in your name before the hearing." Nia turned her head and looked at him fully for the first time in the light of passing street lamps. "You're going to put a house in my name." "It's a practical measure." "A house. A home for you and the child. It strengthens the petition. A judge looking at a woman with a husband, a legal residence, and documented financial stability will have very little grounds to favor your aunt's petition." She faced forward again. Her jaw was tight. "You've done this before." "I've had occasion to understand how institutions make decisions," he said, which was not the same thing as an answer, and they both knew it. The car pulled up outside her building on North Kedzie. It was a 3-flat brick with a cracked stoop and an intercom box that had never once worked since she'd moved in. She'd told the landlord about it 11 times. She had stopped counting at 11. "I'll be 20 minutes, she said. "Take what you need." She got out. She did not look back to see if he watched her go inside. She was fairly certain he did. Mrs. Farrow was 64, Dominican, small, and had the particular energy of a woman who had raised 5 children and was therefore unfazable by nearly any human situation. She opened the door before Nia knocked, which she always did because she heard the elevator from her kitchen. "She's asleep," Mrs. Farrow said immediately, reading Nia's face. "Went down about 9:30. Ate good?" I made rice and chicken. Thank you. Nia stepped inside. I have to take her. I'm sorry. I know it's late. There's something happening and I need her with me. Mrs. Farrow studied her for a moment in the way of someone who already had questions and had decided which ones were worth asking. You okay, mija? It's complicated. Is it Marcus? Nia pressed her lips together. Marcus is handled. The sound Mrs. Farrow made contained 17 years of opinions about Marcus that she had mostly kept to herself. The hearing is tomorrow, 9 a.m. You need me to come? Nia shook her head. I think I have someone. I have help. The words felt strange in her mouth, provisional, like she was testing whether they broke under her weight. I just need to get Maya. Mrs. Farrow let her through without another question. Maya was in the small back room on the pull-out couch, curled tight on her side, her hair wrapped in the silk scarf Nia had taught her to use at night. She was wearing the purple pajamas with the fraying cuffs that she refused to let Nia throw away because she said they were her favorite, even though she had outgrown them by an inch. Nia crouched beside her for a moment and just looked at her. 10 years old, 87 pounds. She had their mother's nose and their father's stubbornness, and she made a sound in her sleep, a soft, rhythmic exhale that Nia had learned to listen for through the wall between their rooms on nights she couldn't sleep herself. She put her hand gently on Maya's shoulder. Hey, baby. Maya stirred, blinked, looked up at Nia with the particular confusion of a child pulled from deep sleep, then the recognition, then the faint alert that something was different. What's wrong? Maya said. Nothing's wrong. We're going somewhere. Come on, I've got you. Going where? Somewhere safe. Put your shoes on. Maya sat up slowly, still more asleep than awake, and reached for her shoes by the side of the couch with the automatic competence of a child who had been woken in the night before and had learned not to ask too many questions until she was fully conscious. She stood, swayed slightly, and Nia put an arm around her shoulders. My bag. I have it. They said goodnight to Mrs. Farrow, who held Nia's hand at the door for just a moment and said quietly, Whatever it is, you're going to handle it. You always do. Nia nodded once and did not trust herself to say anything back. In the car, Maya registered Damien's presence with the immediate animal alertness of a child who had learned to be careful about strange adults. She pressed herself against Nia's side and looked at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Damien looked back at her. He said nothing for a moment, then, I'm Damien. I'm going to help your sister tomorrow. Maya looked at him for another 3 seconds. Then she turned to Nia and said, Is he your boyfriend? No, Nia said. Then what is he? The question sat in the air between all 3 of them. Damien looked out the window with an expression that was almost something like amusement. He's my husband, Nia said. The word tasted like a stone. We're going to explain everything in the morning. Maya looked at her, at Damien, at her. Okay, Maya said, in the tone of a child who has been told something that doesn't fully add up and has decided, provisionally, to accept it until further evidence emerges. She leaned against Nia's arm and closed her eyes. Nia stared at the rain on the window and thought, What have I done? The estate in Lincoln Park was not what she had imagined when Damien said the word estate. She had imagined something distant, something gated and cold, a place that declared its expensiveness by making you feel small. What she found instead was a tall limestone house set back from the street behind old trees, lit warm from inside, with a front door that opened before they reached it because someone had been watching for them. The woman who opened it was 50s, Filipino, wearing street clothes, not a uniform, and she introduced herself as Carmen without being asked. She looked at Nia with quick professional assessment, not unkind, and then looked at Maya sleeping against Nia's shoulder where she dozed off in the last 5 minutes of the drive, and her expression shifted slightly into something softer. I'll show you upstairs, Carmen said. The room she showed them to had 2 beds, twin beds side by side, with clean white linens and real pillows, and a bathroom with towels that felt like they cost more than Nia's weekly tips. Nia lay Maya down without waking her and took off her shoes and tucked the blanket and stood there for a moment in the middle of the room, listening to the quiet. It was the loudest quiet she had heard in years. No traffic through thin walls, no upstairs neighbor, no water heater groaning in the hallway. Just the faint sound of rain on old windows, and Maya breathing, and somewhere far away in the house, the low murmur of Damien's voice on the phone again. She went back downstairs. He was in what appeared to be a study, or something like a study. Bookshelves, a wide desk, 2 phones, 3 people she'd never seen before sitting around a table with legal pads. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. "Come in," he said. He gestured to the people at the table. "This is my legal team. They'll need some information from you." The 3 of them looked up at her with the polite, calibrated efficiency of people for whom this particular scene, a strange woman arriving in the middle of the night, unexpected, consequential, was not unusual. The next 2 hours were a kind of controlled chaos that felt, from the inside, like being processed. Forms, questions, her full legal name, her social security number, her address, her employment history, the name of her lawyer, the case number of the custody petition, the name of the judge, dates, documents. One of the attorneys, a tall woman named Priya, who wore her hair pulled back and spoke in precise declarative sentences with no wasted words, walked her through what would happen in the courtroom in a tone that was so matter-of-fact that Nia found herself, absurdly, feeling calmer. "The marriage license will be filed as soon as the clerk's office opens at 7, Priya said. "We have a magistrate who will perform the ceremony at 4 a.m. Standard legal ceremony, 2 witnesses done in under 15 minutes. You'll want to have identification. I have my license." "Good. After the marriage is documented, we'll proceed to the estate transfer paperwork, which is already drafted. Your name goes on the deed this morning. The trust we're establishing for Maya will be filed simultaneously." Nia blinked. "How is that? You can do that this fast?" Priya looked at her without particular expression. "Mr. Devereaux has resources that allow for expedited processes. Is there a specific concern?" She stopped. "Is this legal?" she wanted to ask. She did not ask it because she suspected the answer was technically, and she wasn't sure she could handle technically at 3 in the morning. At 10 minutes past 3, Damien appeared in the doorway of the room where Priya had been taking her through the final documents and said, "The magistrate is here." Nia looked up. "Now?" "Now." She sat for a moment with the pen still in her hand. The paper in front of her was a financial disclosure form, ordinary and bureaucratic, completely surreal. "Okay," she said. She stood up. She was still in her diner uniform. She realized this, the pale blue thing with the coffee stain on the hem. And something about it struck her as the clearest possible picture of how bizarre this night was. Standing in a stranger's study at 3 in the morning, about to get married, in a uniform that smelled faintly of coffee and the particular fried food warmth of a diner kitchen. Damien looked at her standing there. He looked at the uniform and then back at her face. He said nothing about it. He said, "Ready?" "I don't know what that word means anymore." "That's a reasonable answer." The magistrate was a small white man with steel-rimmed glasses who had clearly been woken up and had clearly been woken up by people connected to Damien Devereaux before, because he showed no surprise and carried himself with brisk competence. The ceremony took place in the front room, witnessed by Priya and Bernard, who had come inside at some point without Nia noticing. It took 11 minutes. There were no flowers, there was no music, there was no one crying. There was legal language spoken by a tired man in glasses, and 2 people who barely knew each other standing close enough that Nia could feel the warmth off Damien's arm. And at the end of it, she was married to the most dangerous man in Chicago. She signed her name. He signed his. The magistrate said, "Congratulations," in the tone of someone reading an agenda item, and left. Nia stood in the middle of the room holding her copy of the certificate and felt nothing for about 4 seconds. Then she felt everything at once, a wave of something she couldn't name. Not happiness, not fear, but some third thing, enormous and nameless, like standing at the edge of a drop and realizing you've already jumped. "Get some sleep," Damien said. He was already looking at his phone. "You have 5 hours. Do you ever sleep?" He glanced up. Something in his expression shifted briefly into something almost human. Not usually. She went upstairs. She lay down next to Maya on the second twin bed. She stared at the ceiling of a room she had never been in before, in a house that was apparently hers now on paper, listening to her little sister breathe, and she told herself one thing at a time. Tomorrow is one thing. Get through tomorrow, and then see what happens next. She was asleep in 6 minutes. She woke to Carmen's hand on her shoulder at 7:15 and the sound of Maya already awake somewhere nearby, asking in her caring 10-year-old voice whether there was any orange juice. There was orange juice. There was also coffee and fruit and something warm on the stove that smelled like eggs and pepper and reminded Nia with a physical jolt that she hadn't eaten since noon the previous day. She sat at a kitchen table that was the size of her entire apartment's dining area and drank coffee and watched Maya eat with the uncomplicated hunger of a child who accepted circumstances without requiring them to make sense yet. Damien was already dressed. Different suit. Charcoal this time, no tie yet, collar open. He was at the kitchen counter reading something on his phone when Nia came in, and he looked up and said, "The filing went through. Marriage certificate is on record as of 6:52. Priya is at the courthouse already." "Okay," Nia said. Maya looked at Damien, at Nia. "He lives here?" "For now," Nia said. "Where's his room?" "Maya." "I'm just asking." Damien looked at Maya over the top of his phone with an expression that was almost, not quite, but almost, entertained. "Down the hall," he said. "The room with the dark door." Maya absorbed this. "Do you have any kids?" "No." "Have you ever been married before?" "Maya?" "It's a reasonable question," Damien said, and it was so close to exactly what he'd said to Nia in the front room at 3 a.m. that she felt something strange flicker through her chest. He looked back at Maya. "No, I haven't." "Okay," Maya said, and went back to her eggs. The hearing was at 9. They left at 8:20. Nia wore the only dress she'd thought to grab from her apartment, a simple dark blue thing, nothing fancy. And Carmen had offered her a coat that fit well and asked no questions about why she needed it. Nia wore the coat. In the car, Maya held Nia's hand and looked out the window. She hadn't asked for a full explanation yet. She was waiting, Nia knew, with the patience of a child who had learned that adults would tell you what you needed to know when they were ready, and that pushing rarely made them readier. She would ask later. She would ask everything in exhaustive detail, and Nia would have to find a way to explain something she couldn't entirely explain to herself. The courthouse was Cook County Civil, gray stone. High ceilings that made your footsteps echo and your voice feel small. Nia had been here before, 8 months ago, for the first preliminary hearing, and she had sat in a hallway on a wooden bench for 4 hours while her underprepared lawyer argued procedural motions against Lorraine's team of 2. She had not won anything that day. She had barely held ground. Today was different. Priya met them in the lobby with 2 associates in a rolling file case. She looked at Damien and gave a short professional nod that conveyed something. Acknowledgement, update, all systems go. And then turned to Nia. "We're in courtroom 7, Judge Marlowe. She's efficient, she doesn't like theatrics, and she has read both petitions. We're ready." "My aunt's already here," Nia said. She had seen Lorraine across the lobby. She always arrived early, always, to establish herself, to make Nia feel like she was the one intruding. She was standing near the elevator in a cream blazer with her husband Raymond beside her, and her attorney, a man named Spaulding, who wore the kind of confident expression that came from winning cases through exhaustion rather than merit. Lorraine saw them at the same moment. Her eyes moved from Nia to Damien, stayed there. Something happened in her face, a ripple, quickly controlled, and then her chin came up and she turned to say something to Spaulding. Nia watched Spaulding listen to Lorraine and then look over at Damien and then look down at his phone and start typing rapidly. "She's figuring out who he is," Nia said quietly. "Let her," Priya said. Maya had gone quiet at Nia's side, pressing close, her fingers tightening around Nia's hand. She had seen Lorraine. Her whole body had changed. That particular stilling that children do when they are trying very hard not to look like they're afraid. Don't look at her, Nia said softly. Look at me. Maya looked at her. We're okay, Nia said. Maya nodded once, jaw set, with a stubbornness that was so clearly inherited from their father that it made something ache behind Nia's sternum. Courtroom 7 was wood-paneled, fluorescent, and smelled like old paper and industrial cleaner. Judge Marlowe was a black woman in her late 50s with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain that she picked up and put on with the smooth efficiency of someone who did not waste movements. She called the room to order at 9:03 and looked at both tables without particular warmth for either. Spaulding went first. He was polished. He had the photographs. Nia's apartment with the bathroom leak circled in red, the financial records showing the account balance, the pay stubs. He had a character witness who worked at Maya's school who had seen Nia, once, lose her temper in a pickup line. He built his case piece by piece with the particular confidence of a man who had reviewed the opposition file and found nothing threatening. Then Priya stood up. She placed the marriage certificate on the bench. She placed the property deed on the bench. She placed the trust documentation on the bench. She placed 8 months of character attestations from Waitress, from Mrs. Farrow, from Maya's teacher, from a pediatrician Nia had forgotten she'd written to, on the bench. The room changed. Nia felt it physically, the shift in atmospheric pressure, the way Spaulding's pen stopped moving and Lorraine's posture shifted, and Judge Marlowe's expression went from neutral to focused to something just slightly, carefully interested. Spaulding stood up. Your Honor, I'd ask for a brief recess to review. You'll have time to respond, Judge Marlowe said, not unkindly but not accommodatingly either. She was reading. She turned a page. She looked up once at Damien, who was seated directly behind Nia, and then back at the documents. Spaulding sat down. He leaned over to Lorraine and said something in a low voice. Lorraine's face did not move in any way that an observer could have charitably called composed. Her eyes went to Nia. Nia met them. She had spent 2 years being afraid of this woman, had spent 2 years imagining this moment and feeling her stomach drop. Now, sitting in this courtroom with a marriage certificate on the judge's bench and Damien's attorney building a wall of paper between Lorraine and Maya, Nia felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, not relief, something quieter. Something that felt distantly like the very early stages of being done. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. Judge Marlowe asked Priya 3 questions. She asked Spaulding 2. She looked at Maya once, briefly, with reading glasses held in her hand, and Maya, who was sitting beside Nia and had been remarkably, terrifyingly still throughout, met the judge's eyes without flinching. Judge Marlowe ruled from the bench. Petition for change of guardianship, denied. Existing custodial arrangement, affirmed. Custody of Maya Brooks to remain with Nia Brooks Devereaux, pending no material change in circumstances. Lorraine made a sound. Just one. Short. Like something deflating. Nia sat absolutely still for the 3 seconds it took the words to travel from her ears to the part of her brain that processed what they meant, and then she pressed her hand over her mouth and held it there, and beside her Maya made a small sound and pressed her forehead against Nia's shoulder. We won, Maya said, muffled. We won, Nia said. Her voice was wrecked. She felt a hand on her shoulder from behind. Brief, firm, and then gone. She did not turn around. In the hallway outside, Lorraine walked past them without stopping. Her heels hit the marble hard. Raymond followed, looking at no one. Spaulding was already on his phone. The whole column of them swept past, and Nia watched them go and felt nothing. That was the thing. After all that fear, she felt nothing watching them leave. They were just people. Expensive, calculating, small. Priya was collecting documents. Damien was speaking quietly with the 2 associates. Maya was examining the brass water fountain on the wall with the focused attention she gave to mechanical objects she found interesting. Nia leaned back against the courthouse wall and exhaled. That was when her phone rang. She pulled it out. Renee. She almost smiled. Renee would want to know how it went. She would be frantic. She had probably been up all night. And she answered. Renee. Nia. Renee's voice was wrong, too flat, too careful, The voice of someone who has been rehearsing what to say and still isn't sure about it. I need to talk to you. We won. The hearing. Lorraine's petition was denied. Maya stays with me. I know. Still that flat voice. I've been following it. Listen, Nia, I need to tell you something before you find out from someone else. Nia went still. Down the hallway, Damien looked up. He was 20 feet away, but something in her posture made him look up, and when he did, she could see in his face that he registered the change in her immediately. What? Nia said. Last night, the voicemail. I didn't just listen to it. What did you do, Renee? A beat of silence that lasted long enough to be a confession all by itself. There were people asking questions, Renee said, and her voice was starting to break now, the practiced flatness crumbling at the edges. About Devereaux. Federal people. They came to me 3 weeks ago because they knew we were close, and they wanted to know if you had any connection to him. And I said no, because you didn't. And then last night I heard the message, and they called me again this morning, Nia. I didn't know it was going to be this. I didn't know you were actually going to marry him. What did you do? Nia said again, and her voice had gone to a place she didn't recognize, something cold and very low and very precise. I gave them the recording, Renee said. The hallway went silent around Nia. Not literally. There were still people, sounds, echoes of footsteps on marble, but in the functional way that silence can descend inside a person when something irreparable has just been said. She lowered the phone. Damien was already moving toward her. He reached her in 5 steps, read her face, and said one word. Who? And before she could answer, his own phone began to ring, and he looked down at the screen, and something in his face went very still in a way she had not seen before. Not the controlled stillness of a man who is used to bad news, but the specific stillness of a man who had just received confirmation of something he had been afraid of. He answered, listened for 4 seconds, hung up. He looked at her. The FBI has the recording, he said. She already knew. She nodded once, jaw tight. They're moving to challenge the marriage, he said. They're calling it fraudulent. If they succeed, Maya, Nia said. Yes. She looked down the hallway to where Maya was still examining the water fountain, completely unaware, one small hand tracing the brass fixtures with curious fingers, her purple cuffed pajamas replaced by the clothes Nia had packed in a hurry, her hair still in the silk scarf wrap she'd slept in. Everything they had just won, in 40 minutes of a courtroom ruling, could be gone by the end of the day. And the person who had made that possible was the one person Nia had trusted with every broken version of herself for the last 15 years. She looked at Damien. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything because there was nothing to say that the situation hadn't already said for them. Whatever this arrangement had been when she'd written, I'm in on a napkin at midnight in a diner, an emergency, a transaction, a desperate and slightly insane solution to an impossible problem, it was not that anymore. It was a target, and they were both standing in the middle of it. The first thing Damien did was call Bernard. Not Priya, not any of the 3 attorneys still standing 20 feet away with their rolling file case and their organized folders. Bernard. 2 words into a phone that he held low against his side so no one else in the hallway could hear, and then he looked at Nia and said, We need to move. Move where? Away from here. Now. Nia looked at Maya, still at the water fountain, now trying to figure out if the handle turned a different way than she'd been trying. 10 years old, completely unaware that the ground had just shifted under all of them again. Maya, Nia's voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. Come on, baby, we're going. Maya turned around. She read Nia's face the way she had learned to read it, with that quick, careful attention that children develop when they have been through hard things and learn that adult faces carry information their words don't always carry. She came without argument. They moved through the courthouse lobby fast, not running but close to it, Priya flanking on one side and one of the associates on the other, and Bernard materializing from somewhere near the front doors, like he had simply always been there. Outside, the car was already pulled up to the curb, which meant Bernard had called the driver while Damien was still on the phone, which meant they had done this before, this specific choreography of leaving a location quickly. enough times that it required no discussion. In the car, Maya pressed against Nia's side and said nothing. She was watching. That was what she did when she didn't have enough information yet. She went quiet and she watched and she stored everything up for later. Damien sat in the front passenger seat, turned halfway around so he could see the street behind them. He was on the phone again, different call, and this time Nia could hear enough to understand that he was talking to someone about a federal contact, about a timeline, about whether there was still a window to challenge the recording's admissibility. The legal language came fast and clipped, and she understood maybe a third of it, and that third was enough to tell her that the situation was worse than his voice was letting on. She pulled out her own phone. Renee had called back twice while they were walking out. Nia stared at the missed calls, at the name on the screen, the contact photo she had used for 6 years, the two of them at a birthday party somewhere, laughing, Renee's arm around her neck in the easy way of someone who had been your friend so long. The gesture was automatic. She pressed the side button and turned the screen dark. Not yet. She could not do that yet. Not in the back of a moving car with Maya pressed against her arm and Damien 3 feet away. She needed to be somewhere still when she talked to Renee. She needed walls around her. They were back at the Lincoln Park house in 22 minutes. Carmen opened the door before they reached it again, and this time her face was different. Not the professionally neutral expression of last night, but something tighter, more alert. The face of someone who had already been given information and was managing her reaction to it. Damien spoke to Carmen in the hallway, low, and Nia heard the word agents and the word afternoon, and then Damien looked at Maya and said to Carmen, "Can you take her to the back? There's a television in the sitting room." Maya looked at Nia. "It's okay," Nia said. "Go watch something. I'll come get you in a little bit." Maya held her eyes for a moment, checking, measuring, and then went with Carmen without a word. Her footsteps were small and deliberate on the hardwood floor. And then they were gone, and the hallway was just Nia and Damien, and the sound of Priya behind them coming through the door with the file case. Damien walked into the study, and Nia followed, and Priya followed, and the 2 associates followed, and the door closed. "Tell me exactly what they have," Damien said. He wasn't sitting. He stood at the center of the room and looked at Priya, and his voice had gone to a place she hadn't heard yet. Not colder exactly, but stripped. Like everything unnecessary had been removed from it. Priya opened the file case. The recording captures the proposal, Devereaux's exact words, your response, the terms as stated. The problem isn't the recording itself, the problem is the framing. They'll argue the marriage was entered into explicitly for legal protection purposes, which under federal statute constitutes fraud, Nia said. Priya looked at her. Potentially. The threshold for marriage fraud in the context of an ongoing federal investigation is, "I know what it means," Nia said. She said it quietly. "I've been on the wrong end of legal thresholds before. I know how that works." A beat. Priya nodded once, with something that might have been respect. The recording is 38 seconds. It captures Mr. Devereaux stating explicitly that he needs a legal wife for protection during a federal investigation. Those are the operative phrases. Whatever the actual nature of the marriage, it's real, Damien said. That may not be the relevant question, Priya said. The relevant question is what a federal judge will conclude when they hear those 38 seconds. Nia sat down in one of the chairs, not because she decided to, but because her legs made the decision for her. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs and looked at the floor between her feet and thought about Renee's voice on the phone. I gave them the recording. 15 years, since 9th grade. Since the locker room incident when Nia had been cornered by 3 girls who had decided she was an easy target, and Renee had walked in and said, without any particular heat, "I'd stop that if I were you," and the 3 girls had stopped, and Nia had never entirely understood why, but she had been grateful ever since with the particular, bone-deep gratitude of someone who has been defended when they didn't expect it. I gave them the recording. She looked up. "What do we do?" Damien looked at Priya. Something passed between them that wasn't a word. "We demonstrate that the marriage is genuine," Priya said. "Irrefutably. We build a documented history, shared accounts, shared residence, witnesses who can attest to the relationship's authenticity. We challenge the recording's admissibility on grounds of illegal interception. And we make the case that whatever language was used in that diner, the marriage that resulted is legally valid, consummated, and they'll push for annulment, one of the associates said. He was young, wore his tie too tight, and had the expression of someone doing math in his head and not liking the results. If the federal case gains traction, they'll move to invalidate the marriage first, because if the marriage is invalid, custody goes back to— I understand the chain, Nia said. Her voice came out sharp enough that the associate stopped talking. You don't need to explain the chain to me. She stood back up. She couldn't sit. She went to the window. Tall, old glass, wavy the way old glass is, and looked out at the backyard, which was large and bare with the specific emptiness of a late fall garden, everything cut back and waiting. Behind her, Damien said to Priya, "Give us a minute." Priya gathered her legal pad and nodded and took both associates out and pulled the door shut. Nia didn't turn around. She heard him move, not toward her, just a shift in the room, the sound of him sitting on the edge of the desk, giving her space. She registered that, somewhere under everything else. You knew this was a risk, she said. Yes. Going in, you knew this kind of thing could unravel. There are always risks, he said. I assessed them differently than I should have. How? I underestimated the leak timeline. A pause. I should have been more careful about the diner's phone system. That's my responsibility. She turned around then. He was sitting on the edge of the desk the way she'd guessed. Not behind it, not at authority distance, just on the edge, and he was looking at her with the same direct steadiness as always, which was simultaneously infuriating and the only stable thing in the room. Renee was one of your risks, Nia said, on your list of things that could go wrong. Was she on that list? He held her eyes. Someone in your immediate circle was on the list, yes. The air went out of her, not loud. She didn't make a sound. It was more like a structural thing, something going quiet in her chest. You thought someone close to me might be an issue. It's standard assessment. And you didn't tell me. Telling you would have what? She crossed her arms. Her voice was still low, but there was something underneath it now, something that had been sitting under the exhaustion and the fear all night, and was now coming up through the floor. It would have what, Damien? Made me careful? Made me not call her? You had my entire situation laid out in front of you in that diner, and you made a decision to keep that from me. I didn't know it was her specifically. That's not the point. What is the point? The point, she said, is that you sat across from me last night, and we made a deal, and I asked you if it was real, and you said, I didn't say it was without complications. You said you don't make offers you don't intend to keep. She looked at him. I need to know what you intended, all of it. Not what the lawyers need me to know, what you intended. He was quiet for a moment, not the kind of quiet that was evasion, the kind that was someone actually considering what they were about to say. I intended to help you keep your sister, he said. That part was not complicated. Everything surrounding it was. And now? Now I intend to fix what's broken. She stared at him. You can't just— This isn't a deal that got renegotiated. This is federal agents with a recording of our marriage proposal. This is my best friend selling me out for— She stopped. Her throat closed around the next words. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a second, and then pulled it away. I don't even know how much. I don't even know what she got for it. We'll find out. I don't want to find out, Nia said, and her voice broke on the last word, just slightly, just the edge of it cracking. I want to not know. I want to go back to last night before I picked up that phone and just— She stopped. Breathed. I have to call her, she said. Nia, I have to talk to her. I need to hear it from her. All of it. Not the version she rehearsed on the phone. The real version. He didn't argue. He looked at her for a moment and then nodded. She called Renee. It rang once. Nia. Renee's voice was raw. She'd been crying. The sound of it did something complicated to Nia's chest, some old automatic sympathy reflex firing before the rest of her could stop it. Nia, I am so sorry. I need you to How much? Nia said. Silence. Renee, How much did they give you? It wasn't about money. How much? $8,000. The words came out small, humiliated. And they told me it was for my protection, that if I didn't cooperate, I could be charged with obstruction because I already knew about the Devereaux connection. And you didn't know anything, Nia said. There was no Devereaux connection. I didn't know that man before last night. I know that now. You knew it then. You knew it when they called you. You knew that I had nothing to do with him and they were pressuring you, and instead of calling me, you just... She stopped. Her hand was shaking against the phone. She looked at it, almost surprised. $8,000, Renee. Nia, please. That's what 15 years is worth to you. That's not... I want you to listen to me very carefully, Nia said, and her voice had gone flat and cold in a way she didn't entirely recognize, a way that felt like something being permanently turned off. I have a 10-year-old girl in the next room who almost lost her home today, who already lost her parents, who has been sleeping on a fold-out couch at a neighbor's apartment at least twice a week for 2 years because I work double shifts to keep a roof over her head. And you gave a federal investigator the one piece of information that could destroy every single thing I spent last night building for her. She paused. Don't call me again. She ended the call. She stood there holding the phone. Damien said nothing. The room was completely quiet. After a long moment, she set the phone on the windowsill and pressed both palms flat against the glass, cold even through her hands, and looked out at the dead garden. She thought she might cry. She waited for it. That particular burning behind the eyes, the pressure in the throat, and it didn't come. What came instead was something harder, something that sat in her sternum like a stone that had been there for a while, and she just hadn't noticed the weight of it until now. She turned around. What do we need to do? She said. Damien looked at her. Are you sure you want to be in this? My sister is in the next room watching television, Nia said. We already did the part where I decided. Tell me what we need to do. He straightened off the desk. First, we need to understand what the FBI actually has beyond the recording. Priya is already working that. He moved to the door. There's something else. Come with me. She followed him down the hallway, past the sitting room where she could hear the low sound of a cartoon, past a second door into a room at the back of the house that she hadn't seen last night. It was smaller than the study. It had no bookshelves. It had a table with 2 monitors and a man she had never seen before sitting in front of them. Compact, somewhere in his 40s, with the particular contained energy of someone who was very good at something very specific. This is Ellis, Damien said. He handles certain information needs. Nia looked at Ellis. Ellis looked at her with the mild, assessing expression of someone taking a measurement. Mrs. Devereaux, he said. The name hit her strangely. She filed that away. Ellis has been tracking the federal investigation for 3 months, Damien said. Tell her what you found this morning. Ellis turned back to the monitors. The recording was submitted to the task force at 6:47 a.m. by a cooperating witness whose identity was sealed, but whose contact profile matches your friend's. He said friend without inflection. But that's not the part that matters most right now. He pulled up a document on the left monitor. The task force already had something before the recording. They had a witness willing to testify that the marriage was discussed as a strategic measure in the context of Devereaux's federal exposure. Someone other than your friend. Nia frowned. Who? Ellis looked at Damien. Damien's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough. We believe it's someone inside my organization, he said. The room went very still. Inside your... She stopped, restarted. Someone who works for you told the FBI that you were planning to use a marriage as a legal shield. That's what the timeline suggests. When did you know this? I suspected it 3 weeks ago. I confirmed it approximately 40 minutes ago. She looked at him. You were already investigating a leak inside your own organization while we were standing in a courthouse this morning. Yes. And you didn't think that was relevant information to share with me. He met her eyes. I didn't have confirmation until... Damien. She said his name the way you say a name when you are done being managed. Flat, clear. If I'm going to stand next to you while federal agents come after our marriage, I need to actually know what is happening, not the version you've decided I can handle, all of it. A silence. Then something happened in his face, some long-held structural resistance, and he said, all right. Who is it? We don't know yet. How close are they to you? Close enough to know about the plan before we executed it, which means close enough to have overheard conversations that weren't meant for... He stopped. There are 4 people in my organization who knew I was planning a marriage arrangement before last night. Priya, Bernard, a man named Cole who handles my financial interests, and my brother. The silence that followed that sentence had a different quality than the ones before it. Your brother, Nia said. Half-brother, Victor. He manages certain operational interests. He and I have had a pause that contained clearly much more than a pause. Disagreements about direction, about where the organization goes from here. He's been pushing to expand into areas I've been pulling back from. And you think he told the FBI? I think he told someone who told the FBI, yes. Whether he understood the full implications or thought he was simply... Does it matter? Nia said. Damien stopped. Does it matter if he understood the implications? She said. Because from where I'm standing, the result is the same. My marriage is under federal scrutiny, my custody arrangement could collapse, and Maya has no idea that the day she thought we won might not be won at all. She crossed her arms. Your family did that, same as mine. He absorbed that. He didn't argue it. What do we do about Victor? She said. We find proof. We present it to the task force ourselves. Proof that he was feeding information to federal contacts in violation of his own obligations. It reframes the investigation, turns the scrutiny. How long does that take? 48 hours. Maybe less, if Ellis finds what he's looking for. And in 48 hours, what's our exposure? Priya appeared in the doorway behind them. Nia hadn't heard her come back. They're moving fast, Priya said. She was looking at Damien, but she spoke to the room. I just got word from our contact at the federal building. They're filing a motion to invalidate the marriage by end of business today. If it goes through, the custody ruling becomes subject to re-examination within 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. Nia pressed her hand against the doorframe. The wood was solid and cool, and she held on to it because it was something that wasn't moving. What do they need to validate the marriage? She asked Priya. What's the legal standard? Evidence of genuine marital intent, Priya said. Shared life, shared history, cohabitation. The longer the documented record, the stronger the case. The problem is we have been legally married for approximately 11 hours. I know how long we've been married. What I mean is, I know what you mean. Nia turned to Damien. We need to be seen together in ways that can be documented, witnessed, and dated. Not staged, actually seen. Because if it looks staged, they use it against us. Damien looked at her with that still, direct attention. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we stop hiding in this house, Nia said. I'm suggesting we go out, tonight, tomorrow. I'm suggesting that anyone the FBI might talk to, neighbors, restaurants, whoever, has something real to tell them, something they actually saw. That's not without risk, Damien said. I know. She looked at him steadily. I also don't have 72 hours to spend in a house waiting for lawyers to save me. I've been waiting for things to save me my whole life. I'm done with that. Something shifted in his expression, very small. She almost missed it. There's something else, Ellis said from behind his monitors. He said it in the careful, neutral tone of someone about to say a thing that nobody is going to want to hear. The motion to invalidate. It's not just procedural. There's a name attached to it. Someone filed a supporting statement. Nia turned. Who? Ellis looked at the screen. Lorraine Mercer Hayes. Of course. Of course she hadn't simply walked out of that courthouse and gone home to be graceful in her defeat. Of course she had pulled out her phone in the marble lobby and called Spaulding and said, I don't care what it costs, find something. Of course, the moment an FBI motion appeared on a docket that touched Nia's marriage, Lorraine had attached her name to it like a barnacle to a sinking ship, because losing was something Lorraine did not do quietly or without extracting as much damage as possible on her way out. Nia turned away from the monitor. She walked out of the back room, down the hallway, to the sitting room door. She pushed it open. Maya was on the couch with her feet tucked under her, watching something animated, and she looked up when the door opened. Hey, Maya said. Hey. Nia leaned in the doorway. You okay? Carmen brought me apple juice. Maya held up the glass as evidence. Is everything still okay? Nia looked at her sister, 10 years old, purple pajama cuffs, apple juice. That serious face that expected the truth even when the truth was hard. She thought about what okay meant. She thought about the 72-hour window and the federal motion and Lorraine's name on a document and Renee's voice saying $8,000 and Victor Devereaux somewhere in the city feeding information to people who wanted to unravel everything she'd built in a single night. It's going to be okay, Nia said. Maya studied her. That's different from everything is okay. Yeah, Nia said. It is. She held her sister's eyes. We've got more work to do, but we're not losing. You hear me? Maya set down the apple juice. What do you need me to do? And something about that, the absolute uncomplicated readiness of it, a 10-year-old asking, what do you need me to do without drama, without fear, just ready, made Nia's throat go tight in a way that none of the rest of the morning had managed. Right now I need you to finish your juice, Nia said, and then I need you to trust me. I always trust you, Maya said, like it was the most obvious thing anyone had ever said. Nia pulled the door shut. She stood in the hallway and held the wall and breathed in once, long and slow, and breathed out. And then she straightened her spine the way she had been straightening her spine her whole life. Not because it made her feel strong, but because she'd learned a long time ago that if you stood up long enough, straight enough, the feeling sometimes followed the posture. She walked back to the study where Damien was standing over the desk, looking at something Priya had placed in front of him, and she said, "Tell me about Victor." Damien looked up. "Everything?" she said. "Start from the beginning. Because if he's the one who did this, I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with." Damien set down the paper in his hand, and outside, on the quiet street in front of the Lincoln Park House, a dark sedan that had been parked at the corner since 8:15 that morning and had not moved in 4 hours sat with its engine off and its windows dark, and inside it, 2 federal agents with a warrant that had been signed an hour ago waited for the word to Damien had just opened his mouth to speak when every phone in the house went off at once. Not one at a time, all of them. Damien's cell, the landline in the study, Ellis's monitor speakers, and somewhere down the hall, the radio Bernard carried clipped to his belt. All of it simultaneously, in the particular way that simultaneous alerts mean only one thing. Something is happening right now. Bernard was through the study door in 4 seconds. He didn't knock. He came in already moving, already talking, his voice low and controlled the way a man's voice gets when he has trained the panic out of it, but the urgency is still underneath. 2 vehicles, federal plates, front of the house. They're on foot. Damien looked at Priya. The warrant. It's early, she said. They weren't supposed to move until... She stopped. Reset. Victor. He told them we were building a counter case, Damien said. It wasn't a question. Nia stood in the middle of the study and felt the walls of the situation close in by about 6 feet in every direction. She thought about Maya in the sitting room with her apple juice and her cartoon, and she said, Maya. Carmen has her, Bernard said. Back room, already moving. Moving where? There's a room off the kitchen with no exterior windows, Damien said. He was already at the desk pulling specific folders from the stack Priya had assembled, the ones with red tabs, moving with a focus that was almost unsettling in its efficiency. She'll be safe. Carmen has done this. Done what exactly? Nia started. 3 hard knocks on the front door, then a voice, loud, calibrated to carry through walls. Federal agents, we have a warrant. Open the door. The room stopped. Nia looked at Damien. He was looking at Priya. Priya was already on her phone. The 2 associates had materialized from somewhere. The hallway, she thought. They'd been in the hallway. And they were sorting documents with fast, practiced hands, separating stacks, moving things to a second case she hadn't seen before. Do not open that door until I say, Priya said to Bernard. She had her phone to her ear, and whoever was on the other end picked up immediately. She said, They are executing now. I need Judge Hartwell's clerk in the next 3 minutes. This is a 4th Amendment timeline issue. And she walked out of the study talking, already somewhere else mentally, in the space where lawyers go when the real work starts. Damien looked at Nia. "Stay close to me," he said. "What does the warrant cover?" "Premises search, financial documents, possibly communications." "They're going to tear this place apart." "They're going to try." He came around the desk. He was very close now, closer than they had stood since the ceremony in the front room, and his voice dropped. "Listen to me. When they come in, you say nothing, not a word. Anything you say in this house with federal agents present becomes part of a record. You understand?" "I've dealt with authority figures before. Not these ones. You don't know what I've dealt with." So something in his face acknowledged that, conceded it. "Say nothing," he said again, not as a command this time, as something closer to a request. "Let Priya handle the talking. Stay next to me and say nothing." Bernard opened the front door. There were 6 of them, 4 in tactical gear with FBI stenciled across the chest, 2 in suits. The one in front, the suit, late 40s, sandy-haired, a face that had been handsome once and had since gone angular and satisfied with itself, held up credentials with the smooth efficiency of a man who had done this many times and enjoyed it each time. "Special Agent Dennis Carter," he said. "We have a warrant to search this premises." He held out the document to Bernard, who didn't take it, which was correct, which was protocol, and Carter's mouth tightened slightly at being refused the small performance of someone accepting his authority. Priya appeared at the top of the hall. "Agent Carter, I'm Priya Anand, legal counsel for Mr. and Mrs. Devereaux. I'd like to review the warrant before anyone moves." "You can review it while my agents are working," Carter said. "That's how this goes." "Respectfully, that's not how this goes when the warrant specificity is in question." Priya came down the hallway without hurrying, without any visible tension, a woman carrying authority as naturally as breathing. She held her hand out. Carter looked at it. He handed over the warrant. The 4 agents in tactical gear waited. They were very still. Nia watched them, and they watched the room, and nobody moved for the 45 seconds it took Priya to read every word. "The warrant covers financial records, communication devices, and documentation related to marriage certification," Priya said. "It does not cover unrestricted search of personal quarters." "It covers the premises," Carter said. "It covers specific categories within the premises. That's not the same thing, and you know it." Carter looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man deciding how much resistance to apply to something. Then he looked past her, at Damien, and something in his look shifted. The professional veneer thinning for just a second into something more personal. He had wanted to come in here himself. That was clear. He had wanted to be the one to walk through this door. "Mr. Devereaux." Carter stepped inside, past Priya, past Bernard, into the hallway. The 4 agents followed. The second suit, younger, thinner, watchful, hung back near the door. "It's a nice house." Damien said nothing. "Your wife's name is on the deed as of this morning," Carter said. "Impressive paperwork for a Tuesday night wedding." He looked at Nia, looked at her in the particular way of someone cataloging, assembling a picture. "You're Nia Brooks." She met his eyes. "Brooks Devereaux," she said. She had told herself to say nothing, and she had lasted approximately 8 seconds, but she was not going to let this man erase the name she had put on a marriage certificate at 3 in the morning. Carter smiled, not warmly. "Right, Mrs. Devereaux." He said it with a particular inflection that communicated precisely how seriously he took it. "Quite a night you had. Desperate phone call in a diner, chance encounter with a billionaire crime boss married by dawn. That's some story." Damien said, "My attorney has identified the warrant parameters. If your agents would like to begin in the study—" "I'll get to the study," Carter said. He was still looking at Nia. "How long have you known Mr. Devereaux?" Priya said, "My client isn't taking questions." "I'm not talking to your client, counselor. I'm making conversation." He kept his eyes on Nia. "You worked at a diner on North Milwaukee, Lena's. You've been there, what, 2 years?" Nia said nothing. She held his eyes and said nothing and felt her jaw tighten. "Here's what I think happened," Carter said. He put his hands in his pockets. Casual, theatrical, the posture of a man who had practiced this particular monologue. "I think you were in over your head. Custody hearing, no husband, no prospects. And then someone made you an offer that sounded like a solution. And I think you were scared enough and desperate enough to take it without really understanding what you were walking into." He paused. "I don't think you're a bad person, Ms. Brooks. I think you got used." "Agent Carter." Damien's voice. Carter looked at him. "You're wasting time you could be spending on the warrant." Damien's voice was completely level, not loud, not heated. "Which tells me this visit is less about evidence and more about observation. You want to see how we respond. You want to see if she breaks under pressure." A pause. "She won't." Carter looked at him for a moment, then back at Naya. "You sure about that?" Naya looked at Carter and thought about every person who had ever looked at her the way he was looking at her right now. Like she was a variable, a circumstance, a thing that had gotten in the way of a situation between more important people. Every employer who had called her sweetie, every person in every courtroom or office who had assessed the size of her body and the color of her skin and decided what category she belonged in before she'd said a word. "Ask your questions or start your search," she said. "But stop talking to me like I'm stupid." Carter blinked. Just once. Something recalibrated behind his eyes. "Take the study first," he said to his agents. "Communications and financial documents." The 4 agents moved. Carter followed them, and that left Nia and Damien and Bernard and Priya's second associate standing in the hallway, and Damien turned to Bernard and said very quietly, "Victor's location." Bernard already had his phone out. "Ellis is on it." Priya came back from the study doorway. "They're being careful about the scope. Carter's smarter than he presents." She looked at Damien. "He's buying time. Whatever they actually have, he's hoping something in this house extends his window." "How long do we have before the motion hits the docket?" "If Hartwell's clerk holds it, 2 hours, maybe 3. After that, it's in front of a judge, and we're arguing in real time." "What do we need?" "Victor?" Priya said simply. "On record, preferably with documentation of the unauthorized information transfer. If we can put that in front of the task force before the motion gets ruled on, they have to disclose whether he was an authorized informant. If he wasn't, everything derived from his cooperation gets thrown," Damien said. "Potentially." "Yes." Naya looked between them. "Where is he?" "Ellis is tracking. Where does he usually go?" she said. "Your brother, Victor. When things get complicated, where does he go?" Damien looked at her with the particular attention he gave her when she surprised him, which she was starting to recognize as a specific expression, something in the set of his mouth, a kind of focused stillness. "There's a restaurant," he said, "on Erie. He conducts most of his business there, public, visible, insulated." "Then that's where we need to go." "Nia, there are federal agents in your study right now," she said. "They're taking your documents. They have a recording of our wedding proposal. Your half-brother fed them information and is sitting in a restaurant on Erie acting like none of this is his problem." She looked at him. "You want to sit here and wait for a judge to rule? Or do you want to go get what we need?" Damien held her eyes for a long moment. Then he said to Bernard, "Car in the back." Carter was in the study when they left. He was standing over one of his agents who was photographing documents, and he was looking at something that made his expression tighten, and he didn't see them go because no one told him they were going, and the back door of the Lincoln Park house opened onto an alley where a second car waited that Naya hadn't known about, and that Bernard apparently kept ready the way some people kept umbrellas. She got in. Damien got in. Bernard drove. "Maya," Nia said. "Carmen will call if anything changes," Damien said. "She's safe." "If Carter finds her, he has no warrant authority over a child, and Carmen has my lawyer's number memorized." A beat. "Maya is not the vulnerability right now." "She is always the vulnerability," Naya said. "To me. She is always the thing I'm thinking about." Damien looked at her. He didn't say anything, but he looked at her in a way that was different from the professional assessment he'd been giving her since the diner. Something quieter, something that sat differently on his face. The restaurant on Erie was called Ferrano's. It had a green awning and potted plants out front, and was the kind of place that looked like it served very good pasta and did, and also served as a neutral location for conversations that required a public setting and good acoustics to ensure privacy. Damien had chosen it once, years ago, and Victor had taken it over as his preferred location entirely, which said something about the brothers that Nia was still working out. They pulled up half a block down. "How do you want to do this?" Nia said. "I go in." "We go in," she said. "Victor doesn't respond well to Damien." She turned to face him in the back seat. "If you go in there alone, it's a family dispute. If I go with you, it's something else. It's a man who has to look at the woman he threw under the bus and explain himself to her face." She paused. "Which do you think is more likely to shake something loose?" He looked at her. He looked at her for a long moment with that still measuring attention. "Stay close," he said. Victor Devereaux was at a corner table, which was always where he sat, because Victor never put his back to a room. He was younger than Damien by 6 years, and it showed in the way he carried himself. A certain unfinished quality, a confidence that was real but hadn't yet been tested enough times to know what it couldn't do. He had Damien's height without Damien's stillness, so he looked like a taller man in a smaller version of himself. He saw them when they were 12 feet from the table, and his face did 3 things in rapid succession: recognition, calculation, and something that was almost guilt but landed 6 inches short of it. He picked up his coffee cup. He held it with both hands, a grounding gesture. Nia noticed it. "Brother," he said to Damien. Damien sat down across from him without being invited. Nia sat beside Damien, which put her directly in Victor's eye line, which she intended. "Who told you about the arrangement?" Damien said. No preamble, no warm-up. Victor's eyes moved to Nia, assessed her, moved back to Damien. "I don't know what you mean." "The marriage, the diner, the timing. Someone told the task force before 6 a.m. The only people who knew before 6 a.m. were Priya, Bernard, Ellis, and you. You're accusing me." "I'm asking you." Victor set down the coffee cup with a small, careful movement. His jaw shifted. "I didn't tell anyone anything." "Victor, I'm telling you I didn't. Someone used your access code to pull the marriage filing from the clerk's digital queue at 5:48 a.m., Damien said, before the filing was even publicly listed. The only person with that access code besides my legal team is you, and my legal team does not have a reason to destroy their own case." He leaned forward, barely, but the quality of his stillness intensified in a way that Nia felt physically even sitting beside him. "Last chance." Victor's eyes went to Nia again. This time, they stayed. "Who is she really?" Victor said. "She's my wife," Damien said. "She's a waitress who was in the right place at the right time, and you're making decisions based on..." "Based on what?" Damien said quietly. "On feeling," Victor said, and the word came out like he'd been holding it for a while, edged with something that wasn't quite contempt, but was heading that direction. "You sat in that diner for 2 years watching her. I know that. Do you think I don't know that? You pulled resources, you restructured the Lincoln Park property, you had Priya on standby. Priya was on standby for the federal investigation, and you used her for this instead." Victor's voice was rising, just slightly, just enough to crack the surface of his composure. "You used organizational resources for a personal, for a woman you barely know, in the middle of a federal case that is the most critical exposure we have ever had, and you made that call unilaterally without consulting." "I don't consult you on my decisions," Damien said. "You should." Victor hit the table once, flat palm, not loud but sharp, and the couple at the next table looked over and then looked away with the speed of people who had learned not to look at things in certain restaurants. "You should, because your decisions affect everyone in the organization, and bringing a stranger into the center of a federal investigation, she's not a stranger, she's my wife." "She is a liability," Victor said, and he looked at Nia when he said it, directly, without the guilt this time, just the flat statement of a man saying what he'd been thinking. "She is an unknown person with unknown allegiances who now has access to your name, your property, your legal standing, and I protected the organization." The silence after that was very loud. Nia looked at Victor Devereaux and felt something cold and very clear move through her. Not anger. Anger was hot and blurry around the edges. This was something else. This was the particular clarity that came from being looked at as a category, as a risk factor, as a problem someone else needed to solve. and recognizing it for exactly what it was. You protected the organization, she said. Victor looked at her. He hadn't expected her to speak. By giving federal agents a recording of my marriage proposal, she said. By filing a supporting statement on a motion that could take my sister away from me. Her voice was completely level. She was very proud of it. You decided, without knowing a single thing about me, that I was the dangerous variable in your brother's life. Not the federal investigation, not whoever has been feeding the task force information for 3 months. Me, the waitress. Victor said, "This isn't about..." "Did you know," she said, "that they're using me to get to him? That the moment they invalidate the marriage, their theory is that the whole arrangement collapses and your brother has no legal buffer and they walk everything directly back to him?" She watched his face. "Did you think about that when you made your phone call this morning? Or were you so focused on getting rid of me that you didn't follow the chain all the way to the end?" Something moved in Victor's face. A hairline fracture in the certainty. "Who told you?" "Priya," Damien said. "She worked out their legal strategy this morning." He looked at his brother. "You didn't protect the organization, Victor. You accelerated their case against it. They used you." Victor was very still now. The composure had gone somewhere, not broken exactly, but gone sideways, tilted, like a wall that had taken damage at the foundation. "That's not..." He stopped. "They came to you," Damien said. "Weeks ago. They made a case for why I was a risk to what you'd built. They gave you a way to remove a variable, her, that felt like it was your idea, wasn't it?" Victor's jaw worked. "Wasn't it?" Damien said again, still that same quiet voice. But there was something underneath it now, something that had been controlled for a very long time and was pressing against its container. "They said she was a plant," Victor said. "A federal plant. Someone the task force had inserted. You believe that?" "It was a reasonable..." "You believed that because you wanted to," Damien said. "Because it gave you a reason to do what you'd already decided to do. Remove the thing that made me unavailable to you." Victor stood up. The chair scraped. He was trying to recover height, recover authority, but it was already gone and all three of them knew it. "I did what I thought..." "Sit down," Damien said. Victor sat down. Not because Damien's voice had been loud. It hadn't. Not because of anything that happened physically. He sat down because of the specific gravity of a man who has reached the very bottom of his patience and gone one level below that, to the place where there's nothing left but the absolute essential truth of who is in charge. "You're going to call them," Damien said. "Right now. Your contact at the task force. And you're going to tell them you made an error. That the information you provided was based on a misrepresentation made to you by sources you now believe were manipulating you. And you're going to say that on record." Victor's face had gone somewhere complicated. "If I do that..." "If you don't do that," Damien said, "what happens next is not something I can make comfortable for you." The threat was quiet. It was so quiet that Nia almost wasn't sure she'd heard it correctly. But she had. And Victor had. And the table between them felt very small. "I need something in return," Victor said. "You don't have that option right now." "Damien, you have one option." Damien's voice was very, very still. "One." Victor looked at Nia. She looked back at him. She didn't give him anything. No sympathy, no reassurance, nothing to hold on to. He had looked at her like a liability, and she was going to let him sit with the weight of what that had cost him. Victor picked up his phone. His hands, Nia noticed, were not entirely steady. He dialed. He waited 2 rings. He said, "This is Devereaux. I need to speak with Carter." A pause. His jaw tightened. "I'll wait." While they waited, Nia's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Carmen. She answered immediately. "They're asking for Maya," Carmen said. Her voice was carefully calm. "Carter sent one of his agents to the back room. They say they need to verify him." "On what grounds?" Nia said. "They're saying the child's welfare needs to be confirmed in the context of the investigation." Nia stood up. "She's a child in a house during a legal search, not a piece of evidence." "I told them that." "Where is she?" "With me. In the kitchen. She's..." A breath. "She's scared, Nia. She's trying not to show it, but she's scared. Nia was already moving, already heading for the door, phone against her ear. She looked back at Damien. He had heard enough of the conversation. He could hear Carmen's voice from across the table. He stood. Victor was still on hold. Damien said to him, "Don't move." He looked at the associate who had followed them in and was standing near the restaurant entrance. "Stay with him." In the car, on the way back, Nia sat with the phone in her lap and the city blurring past the windows and the specific cold fury of a person who has been patient for a very long time and has reached the end of it. She thought about Maya's face, scared but trying not to show it. 10 years old and already so practiced at not showing fear. That was Nia's doing, in some ways. Nia had modeled that. Nia had spent 2 years showing Maya that you held yourself together, that you didn't let them see the edges unravel, that you stood up straight and got through it. She had tried to teach her sister resilience, and sometimes she wondered if she had accidentally taught her suppression instead, and it was a distinction she thought about more than she would ever say out loud. They pulled up to the house. The tactical vehicles were still out front. Carter's second suit was on the front steps, talking on his phone. Damien was out of the car before it fully stopped. Nia was a step behind. The suit looked up, started to say something. Damien walked past him through the front door like he wasn't there. Inside, an agent was in the hallway outside the kitchen, a young woman with her hand up, not blocking exactly, but positioned. "Sir, I need to ask you to—" "That's my house," Damien said. There's an ongoing— "That is my house and my family. And I would like to know," he said, still in that quiet, absolute voice, "why an agent is standing outside my kitchen door." Carter appeared at the end of the hallway. He had heard them come in. He had that look again. The satisfied look. The look of a man who thought the situation was going the way he'd planned. "Mr. Devereaux, we're just conducting a welfare check on the minor." "On whose authority?" Priya's voice came from behind Carter. She had apparently never left. She was standing in the study doorway with her legal pad and her phone, and the particular expression of a woman who has been waiting for someone to make exactly this mistake. Child welfare in the context of— "The warrant does not authorize contact with any minor in the premises," Priya said. "Which you know. Agent Carter, if your agent has made any attempt to access that kitchen without consent—" "Nobody accessed anything," Carter said. "Then your agent can step away from that door." A standoff. 6 seconds of it, everyone holding their positions, the kind of tension that takes up physical space in a hallway. Then Carter looked at his agent and nodded. The agent stepped back. Nia walked past all of them, past Carter, past the agent, past Priya, and pushed open the kitchen door. Carmen was at the counter with her arms crossed and Maya was beside her on a stool, and when Nia came through the door, Maya's whole face changed. The careful, controlled, trying not to show it expression she'd been wearing cracked completely open for just 1 second, and she said, "Nia," in a voice so small and relieved that it went straight through Nia's chest like a key in a lock. Nia crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and put her arms around her sister and held on. Maya gripped her back, hard, both arms, her small face buried against Nia's shoulder, and Nia could feel her breathing, too fast, slightly uneven, the breathing of someone who had been holding it together on willpower alone. "I've got you," Nia said. "I've got you." "There were people," Maya said, muffled. "I know. They wouldn't tell me why." "I know, it's okay." "Is it still going to be okay?" Nia held her tighter. Outside the kitchen door, she could hear Carter's voice and Priya's voice, and somewhere further away the sound of Damien, and the whole situation was still in motion, still unsettled, the FBI still in her house and Victor's phone call not yet confirmed and 72 hours not yet secured and nothing even close to over. She held her sister and said, "Yes," and meant it with every piece of herself she had left. Then she heard Carter's voice go loud, for the first time, genuinely loud, not theatrical but surprised, and she heard Priya say something sharp and fast, and then she heard Damien say, in the voice he used when he had already decided something and was only telling you as a courtesy, "Then I suggest you read it again." She let go of Maya. She looked at Carmen. "Stay with her." Carmen nodded. Nia walked back out into the hallway. Carter was holding his phone. His expression had changed. The satisfaction was gone, and in its place was something raw, something that a man like Carter worked very hard to keep off his face, which made its appearance now tell her everything before anyone said a word. "What happened?" she said. Priya turned to her, and for the first time all day, Priya smiled. Not large, not triumphant, just a very small, very precise smile, the smile of someone whose math had just come out right. "Victor Devereaux submitted a recantation to the task force 7 minutes ago," Priya said. "On record. He's acknowledged that the information he provided was based on representations he now believes were false, made to him by parties he believes had interests adverse to his own." She paused. "And Ellis found the original contact log. 3 months of unauthorized information transfers from Victor's access point to a federal case handler, which means Victor wasn't just a witness. He was an unauthorized informant," Nia said, "which means everything derived from his cooperation is tainted," Priya said, "including the framing used to justify the motion against the marriage. Carter's case just lost its foundation." Nia looked at Carter. Carter was looking at his phone. His jaw was working. He was doing the math in real time, the same math Priya had already finished, and he was arriving at the same answer. He looked up. He looked at Damien, then at Nia. "This isn't over," he said. Nia looked at him. She was standing in the hallway of her house, on the deed, her name, with her sister in the kitchen behind her and her husband 6 feet to her left, and a federal agent in front of her who had walked in here 2 hours ago certain of something he was no longer certain of. She thought about what Carter had said in the hallway. "I don't think you're a bad person, Ms. Brooks. I think you got used." She looked at him now and said, very quietly, "Get out of my house." Carter looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the certainty on her face. He looked at Damien beside her. He looked at Priya with her legal pad and her smile. He said to his agents, "Pack it up." Nobody moved for a second. Then they did. The 4 tactical agents began gathering their equipment. The second suit near the door straightened and clicked something on his tablet. Carter pocketed his phone and didn't look at anyone as he moved toward the exit, which was the particular walk of a man who is leaving under his own power but not by his own choice. At the front door he stopped. He didn't turn around fully, just a partial turn, enough to be heard. "Victor Devereaux's recantation doesn't close this file," he said. "I want you to know that." "I know it," Damien said. "We'll be back." "When you have something that holds up," Damien said, "you're welcome to try." Carter walked out. The door closed. The house went quiet in a way that was different from the quiet before. Heavier somehow, more earned, the quiet of a room that has been through something and is still standing. Nia realized her hands were shaking. She looked at them, almost academically, and pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way she used to tell herself to breathe during the worst nights of the first year with Maya, the nights when she thought she had made a terrible mistake and wasn't equipped for any of this. She was still here. Damien turned to look at her. He was reading her face with that attention of his, the kind that missed very little. "You need to sit down," he said. "I'm fine." "You need to sit down," he said again, not as a challenge, just as a fact he was observing. She sat down, right there, on the floor of the hallway, back against the wall, because the nearest chair was 8 feet away, and her legs had apparently made a decision. She sat on the hardwood floor of a house that had her name on the deed and pressed her hands against her knees and looked at the ceiling. Damien crouched down, not beside her. In front of her, at her level, his forearms on his knees, and he looked at her with the particular directness that she was beginning to understand was just how he looked at things. Unguarded, without pretense, whatever he actually thought showing on his face in small, precise ways if you knew where to look. "You did well today," he said. "I sat in a car and talked to your brother." "You talked to my brother in a way I couldn't," he said, "because you made him see what he'd actually done. I couldn't have done that." She looked at him. "That's the first time you've said you couldn't do something." "I have a list," he said. "It's short, but it exists." Something happened in her chest. She didn't name it. She wasn't ready to name it. From the kitchen, she heard Maya's voice asking Carmen if there was more apple juice, and Carmen saying yes, and the ordinary domestic sound of a cabinet opening and a glass being filled, and Nia closed her eyes for just a moment and held on to that sound like it was something solid. They were still here. Damien was still crouched in front of her when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression shifted. Not much, but enough for her to notice. "Ellis," he said. He answered, listened for 12 seconds. His jaw tightened. He looked at her. "What?" she said. "Carter didn't leave because of Victor's recantation," Damien said. His voice had gone to that stripped-down place again. "He left because something else came in. Something new." He looked at the phone, back at her. "Lorraine filed an emergency motion 40 minutes ago. Different grounds than the marriage fraud. She has a witness." Nia felt the floor shift under her even though she was already sitting on it. "What witness?" Damien held her eyes. "Someone who's willing to testify," he said, "that they personally witnessed Damien Devereaux discuss using you as a means to launder organizational assets. Not the marriage. Something earlier. Something that predates last night entirely." He paused. "If the witness is credible, it changes everything we just built. It takes the marriage off the table completely and makes the custody case about your association with criminal enterprise going back further than—" "That's not true," Nia said. "I know. I had never met you before last night. I know that." "Then who—" She stopped. Her mind was moving fast, pulling at threads, and then it arrived somewhere she didn't want it to arrive, somewhere she'd been avoiding, and she felt it land in her chest like something cold, and the name arrived in her mind before she finished the thought. Not Renee. Renee had given them the recording, yes, but Renee hadn't known Damien before last night. Renee couldn't testify to something that predated last night. Renee didn't have access to anything that went back further than a phone call on a Tuesday. But Lorraine had been building this case for 8 months. And Lorraine, Nia now understood with the particular sick clarity of someone who has been slow to see something obvious, did not work alone. "Spaulding," Nia said. Damien looked at her. "Her attorney," Nia said. "Spaulding has been digging into my life for 8 months. Everything. Employment records, financial records, personal associations. If he found your name anywhere connected to mine, any record of you coming into the diner, any payment, anything—" "My visits to the diner were cash," Damien said. "Petros has a camera," Nia said, "above the register. It's been there for 6 years. He doesn't monitor it. It records to a hard drive, and he keeps 30 days of footage because his insurance requires it." She looked at Damien. "If Spaulding subpoenaed that footage, he has 2 years of you sitting in that booth every Tuesday, and he can frame that however he wants." Damien's jaw tightened. "That's not criminal association." "It doesn't have to be criminal to be damaging," Nia said. "It just has to look bad enough that a judge questions whether Maya's environment is stable, whether I knowingly associated with—" She stopped. "How many Tuesdays?" "I told you, 2 years. Every Tuesday. Every Tuesday." "Damien," she pressed both hands against her knees, "that's over 100 visits, to a diner where I worked, before you ever spoke to me." She watched his face. "Do you understand how that looks to someone who wants it to look bad?" He was quiet for a moment, and in that quiet she saw something she hadn't seen from him yet. Not uncertainty exactly, but the recognition of a blind spot. The specific stillness of a man who had been so certain of his own reasoning that he hadn't fully accounted for how it translated through someone else's eyes. "It looks like surveillance," he said. "It looks like obsession," she said. "At minimum. At worst, it looks like premeditation. Like you identified a vulnerable woman and waited for the right moment to make her an offer she couldn't refuse." She held his eyes. "I know that's not what it was, but I need to know right now from you what it actually was. Because I'm about to walk into whatever comes next and I need the truth, not the version that protects you." The hallway was very quiet. Priya had gone back to the study. Bernard was somewhere near the front door. It was just the two of them, Nia on the floor and Damien crouched in front of her, and outside the November light was going gray and thin and the day was running out. Damien sat down, not crouched anymore, fully down, on the floor across from her, which was such an unexpected thing for a man like him to do that it momentarily silenced the noise in her head. "The first time I came into the diner," he said, "I was in the neighborhood for a meeting that ran late. I went in because it was the nearest place open and I needed coffee and somewhere quiet to think." He looked at his hands for a moment, then back at her. "You were working. You were dealing with a table that had been difficult. I could tell. One of those groups that treats service staff like furniture. And when they left, you stood behind the counter for about 10 seconds and did something with your face. Reorganized it. Put everything back where it needed to be. And then you went to the next table like nothing had happened. He paused. I've been in rooms with very dangerous people my entire adult life. I know what it looks like when someone is carrying something heavy and refuses to put it down. I recognized it. Nia said nothing. I came back the following Tuesday, he said. I told myself it was because the coffee was decent. The third time, I stopped telling myself anything. I just came. He looked at her steadily. I never spoke to you because I didn't have a right to. My life is not a simple thing to walk into. I knew that, and you had enough weight on you already without adding mine. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. It wasn't tense. It was the particular silence of something true that has just been said out loud for the first time, still warm from the interior. Nia looked at him for a long moment. That is going to be very hard to explain to a judge, she said. Something in his face, in spite of everything, in spite of the federal agents and the motion and Lorraine's witness and the whole collapsing architecture of the day, shifted into something that was almost a smile. Yes, he said, it is. She pulled herself up off the floor. She reached down and he looked at her hand and then took it, and she helped pull him to his feet, which was absurd given that he had 6 inches and probably 70 pounds on her. But she did it anyway, and neither of them said anything about it. Priya, Nia called. Priya appeared in the study doorway within 4 seconds. The footage from the diner, Nia said. Petros's security camera. We need to get ahead of it. Priya nodded. I can file a motion to contextualize any surveillance footage before Spaulding introduces it. That's not what I mean, Nia said. I mean we go to Petros. Tonight. And we get his statement first, in his own words, about who came in and when and what he observed. She looked at Priya. Petros has known me for 4 years. He will tell the truth about what he saw. And the truth, told by the right person first, is harder to reframe. Priya looked at her with the measuring expression she used when she was assessing whether an idea was good or whether it was good and also had a catch. It could backfire if Petros's account introduces details that Petros is a 61-year-old man who runs a diner and fixes the espresso machine himself and has never, in 4 years, said a single thing to me that wasn't true, Nia said. I'll take that risk. Priya looked at Damien. Damien looked at Nia. Go, he said. She went. Bernard drove her. Damien stayed at the house because someone had to be there, and because if Damien walked into Lena's, the conversation would become about Damien, and this conversation needed to be about Nia. Bernard pulled up outside the diner at 4:47. The sign still read, Lee A's. The light in the window was on, which meant Petros was there for the afternoon prep, even though dinner service didn't start until 6. She went in alone. Petros was behind the counter resetting the napkin holders, a task he performed with the specific focused attention he gave to all small tasks, as if getting the napkins right was meaningful in a way that accumulating meaning in small, precise acts. He was a compact man with gray at his temples and the permanently flour-dusted forearms of someone who had spent 30 years in food service. He looked up when the bell above the door rang. Nia. He registered her face, set down the napkins. What happened? She sat on a stool. She was very tired. The tiredness had been there all day, underneath everything, and now with the immediate crisis slightly released, it was coming up through the floor. She told him. Not everything. Not the FBI, and not Victor, and not the full scale of it. But enough. The custody case, the hearing, the marriage, the footage from his camera, and what Lorraine's lawyer might do with it. Petros listened with the stillness of someone who did not interrupt and did not perform concern. He just listened. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking and set one in front of her and held the other in both hands. He came in every Tuesday, Petros said. It wasn't a question. Yes. I noticed, Petros said. A man like that, in a place like this. You notice. He sipped his coffee. He tipped 25% every time, on drip coffee. I thought he was either eccentric or trying to make a point. What point? Petros looked at her over his cup. That he wasn't there for the coffee. She looked at the counter. He watched you work, Petros said. Not the way some of them watch. You know the kind I mean. The kind that makes you want to call Bernard. He said the name, which meant he had noticed Bernard in the car outside, which meant very little escaped Petros. He watched the way you watch something you respect, something you don't want to interrupt. He set down his cup. I thought about saying something to you. I decided it wasn't my business. It might have been useful information, Nia said. You had enough on your mind. He looked at her. What do you need from me? She told him. He listened. He said yes before she finished the sentence. The statement he gave to Priya's associate, who came to the diner at 6 and recorded it on a device the size of a deck of cards, was 7 minutes long. It was factual, specific, and delivered in the direct, unhurried way of a man who had nothing to perform and nothing to hide. He described Damien's visits. He described Nia's work ethic. He described, in 3 sentences, what he had observed of Damien's attention to Nia over 2 years. And those 3 sentences were the plainest and most credible thing anyone had put on record all day. He did not frame it as romantic. He did not editorialize. He said what he saw, and what he saw was a man who came to a diner every week and watched a woman do her job with the particular attention of someone who found it worth watching. A judge could do what they wanted with that, but they would have to do it with Petros's words in the room. Nia drove back to the Lincoln Park house with Priya's associate and his recording device, and the smell of diner coffee still on her coat. And when she came in, Damien was in the study with Ellis, and the information on the monitors had changed. More documents, different documents. Something had shifted in the 2 hours she'd been gone. She stood in the doorway. What did I miss? Ellis spoke without turning from the monitors. The emergency motion Lorraine filed. Her witness. He pulled up a document. The witness is named Kenneth Pratt. He claims to be a former associate of the Devereaux organization who left 18 months ago and is now willing to testify to conversations he overheard regarding the use of civilian relationships as financial cover. Is he credible? Nia said. He was credible, Ellis said. Past tense. 3 months ago he signed a proffer agreement with the task force in connection with a separate matter. A wire fraud case that has nothing to do with Devereaux, in exchange for reduced charges. He turned around. His testimony in any proceeding related to this organization is now compromised by that agreement. Priya is filing the disclosure request tonight. By morning, the family court judge will know that Lorraine's star witness is a man who makes deals for reduced sentences. Nia absorbed this. Lorraine didn't know. Spaulding didn't do his research, Ellis said. Or he did, and he gambled that we wouldn't find it fast enough. She turned to Damien. Is that it? Is that all of it? He looked at her. He was leaning against the desk. Not sitting on it this time, leaning, his arms crossed, and there was something in his posture she hadn't seen before. The very early, very careful beginning of someone letting weight down off their shoulders. The federal motion against the marriage is effectively dead without Victor's statement and with the tainted witness, he said. Priya will formally respond to Lorraine's emergency filing by 9 tomorrow morning. The judge who received it is unlikely to proceed without hearing our response. He paused. It's not over. There are still threads. The federal investigation doesn't close because one informant recanted. Carter meant what he said. He'll look for another angle. But tonight, she said. Tonight, he said, Maya sleeps in a house with her sister, and the custody ruling stands. She pressed her hand against the doorframe. The same doorframe she'd held earlier, and it was still solid, still cool, still there. She thought about everything that had happened since 11:15 last night. Less than 20 hours. She had been wiping a counter in a diner. She had been listening to the rain. She had been so tired she'd stopped feeling her feet. She thought about Marcus saying this isn't something I signed up for. She thought about Renee saying $8,000 in that small, ruined voice. She thought about Lorraine's heels on the courthouse marble and the particular viciousness of a person who turned grief into leverage. She thought about a man sitting alone in a dark booth every Tuesday for 2 years, tipping 25% on drip coffee watching her reorganize her face after a difficult table and deciding that was worth watching. "I need to see Maya," she said. She found her in the room with the two twin beds, sitting cross-legged on the one she'd claimed, doing something with a piece of paper, folding it, some kind of origami attempt that wasn't quite working. Carmen had found her construction paper somewhere, which was the kind of practical kindness that didn't announce itself. Nia sat on the edge of her own bed, across from her sister. Maya looked up, assessed her. "You look tired." "I am tired. But it's okay now. For real this time?" "For real this time." Nia reached across the space between the beds and tucked a corner of Maya's blanket. "I'm going to explain everything. Tomorrow, when I'm not running on no sleep. All of it." Maya folded her paper again, not quite getting the shape she wanted. "Do I have to go back to school tomorrow?" "Yes. Even with everything, especially with everything," Nia said. "Everything goes back to normal. That's the whole point." Maya was quiet for a moment, working on her paper. Then, "I like this house." Nia looked around the room, the tall windows, the two good beds, the space. "Yeah?" "It's quiet," Maya said. "Our building is never quiet." "I know. Do we get to stay here?" Nia looked at her sister. The question was so direct and so simple, and the answer was so complicated that she sat with it for a moment, turning it over, finding the true part of it. "For a while," she said. "Yes." Maya accepted this. She held up the paper. It had resolved into something roughly crane-shaped, not perfect, but recognizable. She examined it with the critical eye of someone who knew the gap between what she'd aimed for and what she'd achieved, and then she set it on the windowsill anyway. "Okay," she said. Nia sat on the edge of the bed for another few minutes after Maya fell asleep. She watched her breathe. The same rhythmic exhale she listened for through the wall, present even now, even in an unfamiliar room, the most reliable sound she knew. She went back downstairs. Damien was in the front room, not the study, not behind his desk. The front room, where the ceremony had taken place at 3 a.m, where the magistrate had read legal language in the voice of someone reading an agenda. He was standing at the window looking out at the street, hands in his pockets. He had taken off his jacket at some point and rolled up his sleeves, and the effect was, somehow, of a man slightly more present than he had been all day, less defended. She came to stand beside him at the window. The street was quiet. The dark sedan that had been at the corner all day was gone. The old trees moved slightly in the wind. The rain had finally stopped. "Tell me about the first Tuesday," she said. He looked at her. "Not the diner version. Not what you told me on the floor. The actual first one, what you ordered, what table you sat at, what I did." She met his eyes. "Tell me a specific thing. Something I did that you actually remember." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the street. "You were arguing with the coffee machine," he said. "The espresso thing. It wasn't working right, and you were hitting the side of it with the flat of your hand and saying something under your breath. You got it working, and then you made a drink for a customer and you tasted it first, just a small sip, to make sure it was right before you served it." He paused. "Nobody asked you to do that. There was nobody watching. You just did it because it was right." Nia remembered the espresso machine. It had been broken on and off for 6 months. She had developed a specific technique involving the side panel and a particular angle. She didn't remember being watched. "That's a small thing," she said. "Small things are what people actually are," he said. "Anyone can perform the big moments. The small ones you don't perform. You just do them or you don't." She turned to look at him fully. At the profile of a face she had known for less than 24 hours, and somehow had the feeling of having studied for much longer, the way you sometimes feel about places you've only just arrived in. "This is a very strange situation," she said. "Yes. I don't know how to do this, any of this." "Neither do I," he said, in case that was unclear. It was not unclear. She looked back out the window. "What happens with Carter?" "Carter is going to look for another angle," Damien said. "He'll find one eventually. That's his job, and he's good at it. What he won't find is what he was looking for today, because what he was looking for today doesn't exist. The fraud." "The fraud," he said. There's no fraud. Whatever this is, it isn't that. She heard the particular weight of whatever this is and let it sit without naming it, because naming things before they were ready to be named had a tendency to make them smaller than they were. Victor, she said. Damien's jaw moved, just slightly. Victor will cooperate with the disclosure process. He made that decision when he picked up the phone at Ferrano's, and he knows what comes with it. A pause. He was wrong about you. He was wrong about his reasons, but he was also... He stopped. Scared, Naya said. Damien looked at her. He was scared of losing you, she said. Not of me. Not of losing the version of you that belongs entirely to the organization, to him, to the thing you've built together. She held Damien's eyes. I understand that feeling. I understand being so afraid of losing someone that you do something destructive to protect what you have. She thought of Maya, of every decision she had made in the past 2 years that a calmer, more rational person might have made differently. It doesn't make it okay, but I understand it. Damien was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You're more generous than I would be. I have a 10-year-old teacher, she said. She's very patient. Outside, a car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across the front room wall, and for a moment the light moved across both of them, and then was gone. I owe you something, Damien said. She looked at him. You walked into this without the full picture, he said. I made decisions about what you needed to know, and I was wrong about those decisions. More than once. He held her eyes. I don't do well with ceding information. Control. I've survived by keeping the map in my own head, but you can't navigate that way when someone else is traveling the same road. She considered this. It was, she recognized, as close to an apology as the architecture of him currently permitted. Not a small thing from a man like him. I know you can't promise me safe, she said. I'm not asking for that. Carter's going to come back. There are going to be more victors. More things you didn't tell me. She paused. But I need to be in the room for the actual decisions, not the version of events you've decided I can handle. Yes, he said. That's it? Just yes? What else would you like me to say? I don't know, she said. I was expecting more resistance. You've been underestimated enough today, he said. I'm not adding to it. She stood at that window for a moment longer. The street was entirely quiet now. The city beyond it hummed in its low November register, the particular frequency of a place that never fully stopped, but had at least slowed to something manageable. She thought about the napkin. I'm in. Written in ballpoint on a diner napkin at 11:15 on a Tuesday night. She had written it with the feeling of someone signing something they couldn't fully read. She had handed it across the counter to a man she didn't know with the desperation of someone who had run out of other options. That part was true, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. But standing here now, in this quiet room, with Maya sleeping upstairs and Petros's words on a recorder and Lorraine's motion crumbling under its own deceptions, she thought about what Damien had said, crouched on the hallway floor. Small things are what people actually are. She thought about what she had done today. Not the dramatic moments, the small ones. Talking to Victor until she found the crack. Sitting on a diner stool and asking Petros for the truth without making it dramatic. Calling Renee back even when she didn't want to. Standing in a courthouse hallway and saying Brooks Devereaux to a man who was trying to make her feel small. Those small things. They had been hers. The following morning, Priya filed the response to Lorraine's emergency motion at 9:04. She included Petros's statement, the disclosure of Kenneth Pratt's proffer agreement, and a detailed accounting of the timeline that made Lorraine's case look exactly like what it was. A desperate, poorly researched last attempt by a woman who had never had Maya's welfare as her primary concern. The family court judge reviewed the filing and denied the emergency motion by 11:15. Lorraine did not call. She did not attempt contact. Spaulding sent a formal letter of withdrawal from the custody matter 3 days later, which was the last document in the case file. It was over in the way that legal matters end, not with a climax, but with paperwork, with a stamp and a date and a number filed in a system, and then nothing. just the absence of threat where threat had been. Nia went back to the diner on Thursday. Not because she had to. She had, on paper, on a deed, in a bank account that made her feel slightly dizzy when she looked at the numbers, resources she had never had before. And she was still working out what that meant and what she was willing to let it mean. But she went to Lena's on Thursday because Petros was expecting her, and because the coffee machine still did the thing with its side panel, and because she understood by now that the small things were what people actually were. Petros was behind the counter when she came in. He looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her for 4 years, with the particular attention of someone who had watched her through hard seasons and made no large declarations about it. "The sign," Nia said. He looked at her. "Get the sign fixed," she said. "The A has been out for 3 years." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It gives the place character. It gives the place the look of a building that has given up," she said, which was what she had told him 3 years ago, and he had laughed at then. "Get it fixed, Petros." He picked up a coffee cup and dried it. "You going to pay for it?" "Yes," she said, which was new. He set the cup down. He was hiding something around the mouth that wasn't quite a smile but was in the neighborhood. "Fine," he said. "The sign." She sat at the counter and drank coffee and looked at the booth in the far corner where the light had always been slightly wrong, the 2 bulbs still unreplaced, the particular darkness of a place that held something she hadn't known it was holding. She thought about someone sitting there alone every Tuesday for 2 years, watching her hit the side of an espresso machine and taste a drink before she served it and reorganize her face after difficult tables. Finding that worth returning for. She was not a simple woman to have loved. She had known that for a long time, in the way that people know the difficult things about themselves, not as criticism, but as fact. She was stubborn and overworked and suspicious of comfort and had spent so many years caring for someone else that she had lost the habit of being cared for. She was not light or easy. She was the kind of person who sat down on a hallway floor when her legs gave out and didn't cry about it. But she had, it turned out, been seen. Not the version of herself she presented, the version she actually was, at 11 o'clock at night in an empty diner, holding together by the particular tensile strength of someone who has been holding things together for so long, it has become structural. That version. The real one. She finished her coffee. She left a tip. She went back out into the November air, which was cold enough to sting but not cold enough to hurt. And she stood on the sidewalk outside LEA's and called Carmen to check on Maya, who had gone back to school that morning and had reported that it was fine and boring, and could she please have the good backpack, the one with the extra pockets? She could. She stood on the sidewalk for another moment after she hung up. The city moved around her, traffic and someone's radio and the distant percussion of construction somewhere east. The ordinary, unbeautiful, entirely specific texture of a life in a particular city in a particular season. She had been frightened for so long that she had stopped noticing it. The way you stop noticing a sound that has been constant long enough. And now, standing outside a diner with a coffee stain on her coat that she still hadn't addressed, and a phone that needed a new screen and a life that was unrecognizable from 3 days ago, she noticed its absence. Not gone. Not permanently. Carter had meant what he said, and she believed him. The road ahead had things on it she couldn't see yet. Victor was a complication that would need tending. The federal investigation was a shadow that didn't disappear because one motion failed. But the fear that had been structural, the fear underneath everything, the fear of losing Maya, of being insufficient, of being looked at and found wanting, that specific fear had shifted, had moved into a different configuration inside her. She had walked into a courtroom with no options and no husband and no plan, and she had walked out with all 3. She had sat on the floor of a hallway in a house with her name on the deed and told a man the truth about how he was going to be seen, and he had listened. She had called Petros. She had gotten in the car. She had talked to Victor. She had held her sister in a kitchen while federal agents moved through the house. She had done all of that, and she was still standing on a sidewalk in November with coffee getting cold in her system and her feet starting to ache again, which meant she was still here, still present, still occupying her own life. That was not nothing. She walked to the car. Bernard was at the wheel, patient as ever, the morning paper folded on the seat beside him. He looked up when she opened the door and he said, "Home?" She thought about the Lincoln Park house, the tall windows, the quiet, Maya's origami crane on the windowsill. She thought about a man who had been waiting, in various ways and for various reasons, for a long time. "Yes," she said. "Home." Bernard pulled away from the curb. The sign above the diner receded in the rearview mirror. LEA's incomplete, slightly wrong, still standing after 30 years. She looked at it until it was gone. Then she looked forward through the windshield at the city going about its business on an ordinary Thursday in November, and she let herself, quietly and without making anything of it, simply be in the life she had fought for. It wasn't clean. It wasn't resolved in the way stories sometimes pretended things resolved. Carter would come back. Victor required watching. Renee was a wound that would take a long time to scar over properly, if it ever did. The federal case was a weather system that had not moved on, only quieted. But Maya was in school with the good backpack, and the sign was going to get fixed. And somewhere between a napkin in a diner and a hallway floor and a restaurant on Erie and a Tuesday morning courthouse, something had begun. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, not a transaction that had been mistaken for love, but something honest. Something that had been tested before it had been named and had held anyway. That was worth something. Nia leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes and let the city carry her home.